Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Voices of ASEAN. My name is Beatrice, and today I'm very excited because we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, capitalism, and how it's been misrepresented. Some people say that capitalism has failed, but has it? Because what so many people mistake as capitalism is really cronyism or socialism for the well-connected. And this is what our guest for today will be speaking about. I am so pleased to be joined by Rob Chatfield, the president and CEO of Free to Choose Network, which is a US-based media organization that advocates for economic freedom. Free to Choose Network first gained fame for producing the Free to Choose documentary series featuring Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman. And since then, it has produced countless of very engaging, very thought-provoking documentaries, including their latest, Corporate Welfare. Where's the outrage? This ties in perfectly to our topic for today. So joining us live from Texas, USA, here is Rob Chatfield. Hi, Rob.
Beatrice, always a great day to talk about Milton Friedman. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on board. Now, Rob, let's plunge straight into you. You have worked in finance, in mergers and acquisitions advisory, and even as a lecturer, like I used to be a long time ago, many moons ago. How and why did you come to join Free to Choose Network and become its president and CEO?
Beatrice, I think it's because in my last career, nobody was introducing me to intellectually beautiful women from Malaysia. And so I had to get a new job if I was going to get an interview like this. But it's a really long story, though, because when I first started my career, I actually started in a think tank as a nonprofit when I first got out of college. And then I went from that think tank into private industry, but I always kept a foot in the classroom, always tried to teach. And because of that, when the founder of Free to Choose Network, Bob Chittister, who was the producer of Milton Friedman's Free to Choose, was looking for his replacement, he hired me because he said nobody had done all the reading that I had done. I had literally, you couldn't make up for the 40 years of reading that I had done and had that background to know about free markets, free people, and capitalism. He said, you can find film producers. They graduate thousands of film producers a year, but you can't find somebody who can go out and sell freedom and knows the literature.
That's amazing. And what made you gravitate towards this? There must have been a spark somewhere there that made you choose this topic and have so much of reading that comes out of it.
I think some people are born with an entrepreneurial gene. They're entrepreneurs at heart. And I think that those are the people there. And somebody I was talking to who I respect a lot thinks, it's probably only 5% of the population, honestly, that really are entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think so too.
If you ask most people, they probably would say, I'm happy if someone else would take care of me. But there's a certain segment of the population that won't ever stand for that. They'll say, if I am bankrupt, I'm bankrupt. If I'm rich, I'm rich, but I'm going to make it on my own. I'm going to figure out my own path. And I think that's, as I said, I think you're born with that or you're not born with that. But I think you can learn and you can teach people those virtues such that they can appreciate that, because that's what's going to make society move forward.
I think so. These are your natural born leaders. These are the ones who actually change, impact the world and make it move forward. So I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. And what's important, why I wanted you on board, is to be able to tell people the truth about things, because I think over the years it has changed. So coming to my next question, the Free to Choose Network, or FTCN as it's popularly called, is a media organization that promotes economic, personal, and political freedom. Now, can you tell us more about what it does? Rob.
So we do primarily documentary films. That's our stock in trade. Again, we started by producing Milton Friedman's Free to Choose in 1980. We're still growing strong over 40 years later. Two of our most recent films, we did a biography on Thomas Sowell.
Oh, I love that.
And many of your viewers, I hope, are familiar with Thomas Sowell.
Not many people are, but yes. Tell me more about it.
You'd be surprised, though, the number of people who comment on YouTube and said, I've never heard of this man before. And especially the African Americans who comment and say, where have they been hiding this man?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then our most recent film, which you alluded to, was called Corporate Welfare. Where's the Outrage?
Yeah.
And we try to take topics, as I said, that take a look at capitalism and freedom and give them a little bit of a different spin. So we're really out there trying to educate the marketplace really on what capitalism is. As you were talking about earlier, I think most people have still this misconception that capitalism must be somehow intertwined with government. But it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with people making choices.
Yeah, freedom, empowerment.
So, and I think if you look at it from that perspective, people who are free to choose, those who have the most choices, they have the most opportunities, they have the most ability to choose their own path. Those people are going to be happier, healthier, wealthier on average than those who can't. If you're given more opportunity, why wouldn't you try to flourish with regards to the skills and interests that you have?
Yep. And when you flourish, the society around you flourishes. You create
by far.
jobs. Yeah. You create jobs, you create opportunities. And so, but are we really free to choose? I mean, I'll come to that in the next question.
That's all right.
So much to ask you.
Good point. Most people don't know how jobs are created. You know, if you look at some countries that sit there and they go, well, I need to get a job in government because that's where the money is. And that's not where the money is. That's not where the money comes from, if you will. Jobs are created by people serving others, people who come up with ideas that say, if I do this, then my fellow man will be better off.
Yep. And I think these are your wealth creators. The whole world depends on this 5% who generate wealth for everyone else. And government does not generate wealth. Government distributes it. Am I right?
And if you think about it, and people talk about how, oh my gosh, that person is so rich, they have more money than they need, you know, et cetera. Most people I know of that grow their business will tell you, it's not like, oh, if I have more money, that I'm going to eat one more meal.
Exactly.
Or that I'm, you know, as I said, you know, maybe their house is bigger, maybe they have a nicer car. Most people who are growing the business do so to serve their fellow human being. And that's really the concept for that there. And they're providing jobs, they're providing opportunities for others. But there's only so much. Again, as I said, you can only drive one car at a time. You can only fly in one plane at a time. You can only live in one house at a time. So it's not as though these people sit there and say, I'm going to accumulate all of this stuff just because I'm greedy. It's I think that the concept of greed essentially means that they want to do better.
Yep. And you can only sleep in one bed at a time. So right, what's the point of having so much wealth, and all the extra wealth goes out, and every time you buy something, or you're actually creating more services that will actually again help people who are contributing those services. So I love this concept.
As I said, and the consumers for it are made better off because then they have choices with regards to the services or the products that they want to buy. And so that's really what capitalism is all about. It's just about people voluntarily getting together to serve each other. And if you look at the alternative to that, it's somebody else telling you what you want and how you're going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Free to Choose Network, it advocates the principles of Milton Friedman. And it produced the Free to Choose TV series on Friedman's theories in 1980. I think more than ever now, Friedman's theories are extremely important and relevant today. And I'm going to bet half of our audience do not know who Milton Friedman is or was and what he espoused. Can you tell us what's happening now and why Milton Friedman and his theories are so important, more important than ever today?
First, the series itself, Free to Choose, is timeless. Today, even, we still have people, and I'm involved with a lot of organizations that work with students. And these student organizations, in terms of how do the students find out about freedom and liberty? You know, of the top 4 ways that they found out about it, Milton Friedman's Free to Choose is still one of the top 4 ways that people find out about this. And that's international, by the way, because the ideas are timeless. I want to take people a step back further. In 1962, Milton Friedman wrote a book called Capitalism and Freedom. And it was how to apply these principles of political, personal, and economic freedom to public policy problems. So it's 60 years ago. The Free to Choose television series was actually created to make that book more accessible. Because most people still today don't read a book for, it's only a 200-page book. It's a pretty easy read.
Yeah.
But still, as I said, the television show made it all more accessible to people from there. And so that's what Free to Choose did. Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976. And Milton, the difference between Milton and most other economists was Milton was also a salesman.
Okay.
He understood that concept that, economics is about people, it's about the choices people make, and it's about human flourishing.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at it from that perspective, that's what Free to Choose was trying to show, was every time you give people the opportunity to choose some way, some shape, how they were going to form their own destiny, if you will, then those people flourished more often than not. And yes, some of them failed, but the opportunity to flourish is there if you give people more choice and more opportunity. And that's why this is still relevant today. As I said, it still hits the concept all the time with regards to people saying, what's the system that's going to work best? In the book, Capitalism and Freedom, the second paragraph of the first chapter actually talks about democratic socialism.
Yeah.
And I bring students, it's a nonprofit, by the way. Free to Choose Network is a not-for-profit organization in the United States. So we own Milton Friedman's summer home where he wrote Free to Choose. And I bring students there for a 1-week-long residential session where they study Free to Choose and Capitalism and Freedom in Milton's own living room. Oh, wow. It's an incredible experience for these students. And they're amazed.
And that's in Texas?
And this is actually in Vermont, which is up near, it's just outside of New York, but not New York City. That's that's a different New York. We call it upstate New York and downstate different, but it's in Vermont. It's a beautiful countryside location. And the students come there, as I said, the first thing they see is democratic socialism. And they say, what was this? He's talking about democratic socialism. We're talking about that today.
Yeah.
What's it mean? And nobody can still define what democratic socialism is. It's this nebulous thought out there that's supposed to make everything all better because the people get to vote on something.
What is it?
If you asked me to define democratic socialism, I couldn't tell you. The socialists say every time socialism fails, Beatrice, you're probably aware of this, they say, oh, that's not the kind of socialism we want.
Yeah.
Every time it's tried, though, they always, at some point, there's a honeymoon period, and they say, oh, this is it. This is the socialism we want. And then it fails, always. And the reason it fails is because socialism is centrally planned. It means you survive by politics, not surviving by the market.
Exactly.
And if you look at it from that perspective, yeah. If you have to rely upon your political skills in order to get ahead, then it doesn't mean you're actually serving your fellow man. It just means you're serving yourself. Those are the people who are the most greedy. And people call capitalism greedy. It's really the socialists who think, oh my gosh, I know more than you do. I know better than you how your life should be lived. That to me is the ultimate.
Yeah, that's awful. That's like slavery for me. If someone tells you how you should live your life.
By far, yeah. Mm-hmm.
As long as you're not hurting someone else and you're doing something good for you, you should be allowed to do that. Why else are we free beings then if we can't do that?
Right. Mm-hmm. Again, as I said, so if you look at still, why is Milton Friedman relevant? It's because the things he was talking about 60 years ago, we're still talking about today. Yeah. We still talk about education and how to fund education and what should do with education. We still talk about social welfare programs. We still talk about fiscal policy, how governments spend money. Everything is still relevant today.
And why is it not taught more in schools? I mean, so few people know this. I mean, is there a particular reason that this is not the freedom? We talk about freedom, we talk about democracy, we talk about all that, but we don't weave capitalism as one part of what real freedom is.
Yeah, and thankfully we try to do something. So the Free to Choose Network actually has 3 divisions. There's the documentary films, which is what most people know us for. There's the Milton Friedman House, which I just told you about. But the 3rd division, I think, is the most important. We actually have an organization called IZZIT.org. And we have classroom videos on there. And teachers can download these classroom videos. I don't care what country you're from. You can download the classroom video and the teacher's guide. And we try to put these ideas into the classroom space.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and we make it very digestible because a teacher can't show a 1-hour film or a 10-hour series on free to choose in a classroom space, but they can show a 15-minute video and then lead a discussion with the students. And I think that that's the important point, is getting the students to start talking about this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's great work that you do. Excellent. And how long has the Free to Choose network been around doing these things?
It's almost 40 years. So the television series Free to Choose came out in 1980.
Oh, wow.
And then our nonprofit was started a few years after that.
How do people contribute to this? Let's say people around the world, someone's tuning in and say, I want to contribute to that because I think that has to have a bigger voice. How do they contribute? How can they contribute?
I was going to say there's two sides to that question there. One, of course, is we're a not-for-profit, so we take donations. If somebody wants to donate money to us for a project, we will happily take that donation by far. But the biggest thing that they can do, honestly, is take the product, go out and share the product. You know, we have a YouTube channel. If they subscribe to the YouTube channel, they can share that. If they're on LinkedIn tonight, we have a LinkedIn presence there. When we post something on LinkedIn, somebody could share that. The more people spread the word, the better off we're all going to be.
That's great. And how much impact do you think you've done over the 40 years? Is there a discernible way that you can actually measure how much impact, how much of the world you have changed mindset, thought leadership created?
It's a great question, and my board of directors asks me this all of the time, by the way, because they don't care about historical. They want to know about tomorrow. What minds are going to change tomorrow? If you look historically, though, Milton Friedman and Milton Friedman's ideas were what started the Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher revolution. So he was an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. And that's what really, as I said, when they took that concept of free markets and capitalism and said, we're going to do this here, we're going to let the market economy determine how we survive, that really changed the world. And as I said, the Cold War ended within 8 years of the United States adopting these policies. No less an authority than Secretary George Shultz said the most influential person in the last 50 years was Milton Friedman. And I think, from that perspective, the ideas of free to choose really changed the world. But now you have a generation that is 2 generations away from 1980. The students today, for them, 1980 is a complete history lesson. 2000 is a complete history lesson. And so always, and I take this line from Thomas Sowell, the vision of the socialist is way more appealing than the vision of the capitalist. If you think about it, everybody's going to be equal. We're all going to share. Things are going to be wonderful. The problem is it just isn't so.
Yeah, I agree.
And so when you look at it from that perspective, we still have to educate every generation with regards to why capitalism as a system is a better system for them. And it's always because people are in charge of their own decisions.
Yep. You empower the individual, you empower his family, you empower society, you empower the nation, you empower the world.
Right.
And you do not curb innovation.
Correct. But you're right. We have to put this stuff into the schools, Beatrice. And it's not in the curriculum.
It is not.
And so what we do, by the way, is we take things that are in the curriculum and then we work in the message of capitalism and freedom. So in the United States, this is a great example. In the United States, they might have a geography class and they might talk about Latin America, South America.
Yeah.
And so we'll produce a video that shows Peru, the country of Peru. And so, we'll show where the map is, we'll show Peruvian people, but the lesson we show them is about how the Peruvian people obtained property rights. In a video we did is actually called, and you can find it on the website, by the way, that's izzit.org, again, IZZT.org, it's IZZIT.org. There's a video called Eusebio's Dream, and it's about his guy's dream was his family had farmed the land for generations, but they didn't own it because they didn't have a title. And so now the students, they learn about Peru, they learn about South America, but they learn about property rights and why it brought that man to tears the day he was able to get title to his own property. So those are the stories. We try to tell things through stories because you can't hammer people over the head with capitalism is good, capitalism is good. You have to show them the stories of where capitalism improves lives.
The converse is happening in most schools and universities. That they're taught that capitalism is a bad thing and socialism is a good thing. That goes to my next question. A lot of and because of that educational change that comes from the schools and the universities, a lot of people are beginning to think that capitalism is bad, that it's evil, you fat capitalist pig, and these terminologies and phrases like that. But I always have believed that people think what they think is capital, what they're being taught that capitalism is bad is really crony capitalism or socialism for the well-connected. And Friedman himself was a big critic of crony capitalism. So as a Friedmanite, would you be able to share with our audience and me too why crony capitalism cannot be associated with real, true, authentic, genuine capitalism?
The first thing I want to point out is we named our film Corporate Welfare, Where's the Outrage? Because we wanted to show people where it came from. Corporate welfare comes from government. It's like another government program, if you will. It has nothing to do with capitalism. And we chose that name specifically, and I also use the word cronyism because I don't think there is such a thing as crony capitalism. And I'll tell your viewers, by the way, where the word comes from. They should be calling it crony socialism, though. When government and business are in collusion, to me, that's more socialism than capitalism. The phrase, though, crony capitalism actually comes from an article in Time magazine about the Marcos regime in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And in the Marcos regime, they would essentially give monopoly business power to his friends and relatives to go ahead and start all the major industries and businesses in the country. And so the journalist who coined the phrase crony capitalism actually said, this isn't capitalism. However, as you can imagine, as I said, people then took and they glommed onto the phrase and they turned crony capitalism into what was called, this is what the system is. You can't get ahead unless you're well connected. You can't get it. But that's not what capitalism is. Capitalism essentially is just you and I being able to enter any career that we want to enter. If we want to start our own business, doing anything we want to start, that there's no barrier to entry for us to get into that business. And that's what capitalism is supposed to be about. And yes, you might need capital. You might have to get investment from some other organization, some bank, some investor. And so there's a component of capitalism that does involve a third party, but it wasn't supposed to involve government. It was always supposed to be between private individuals making private choices.
Yeah. The government was supposed to be separate from the enterprises. So that more of an administrative entity. Am I right?
Right. And if you think about it, again, I'm going to go back to cronyism and corporate welfare. That system only exists because government allows it to exist. Government enjoys it when business comes and pays them money to support their reelection, to their campaigns, and then government people return the favors by giving them special favors.
That's lobbying.
And I think
that's lobbying, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And all of lobbying, the purpose of lobbying is to prevent competition. If you think about what makes capitalism a wonderful system, it's a system of competition. And competition, I can't think of anything. If you think of athletic sports, for example, competition makes people better. Yeah. If you think of, I don't care if it's a spelling bee or something there, as I said, if you have any kind of competition, people tend to rise to a different level to compete to win. People want to win. But when you have this system of cronyism, you've taken away that incentive plan. And now the incentive plan is let's reduce the competition and let's keep the entrenched interest in place.
Yeah. So obviously you advocate small and limited government. And I would like you to explain more on how the role of an ideal government should be that helps everybody.
For me, I think first it starts with rule of law, that everybody has to be able to, is held accountable to that same standard. You can't have laws for a certain class of people and other people don't have to follow those laws. Yeah. In America, the greatest example we have is actually that, Congress, if you are on your way to go to a vote in Congress, you can break the law. And we had a famous case where a congressperson was driving drunk and got in an accident, and the police pulled him over. He says, I'm on my way to Congress. I'm going to go vote on a law. And he got off scot-free because that's, as I said, there's a whole different segment. And I think when you start just with that concept that the rule of law doesn't apply to others, I think that's the basic thing. You've got to have rule of law, which means that the law applies equally to everybody. And then the government has to just be a referee and set up a system that allows people to thrive when everybody's competing with that same rule of law. Anytime government's trying to pick the winners and losers, you have corporate welfare.
That's corporate welfare. I love the way you define it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm waiting for more. Is there more?
Oh, as I said,
okay,
that's all I need from government. I don't need much more from government than that.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting perspective. People don't see it that way. A lot of, especially the youth, they don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm. No, as I said, they look for government, and this is the problem. Now, the youth of today, and Mike, you've seen this in the pandemic. People are now looking to government for the solution. What does the government tell us? These people must know more than we do. Well, no, they don't. They're just human beings like you and me that happen to be put in a position of power over you. And to me, as I said, that's the real downfall of society right now is people looking to the government for answers when people should be looking to each other for answers.
Yeah. So if you have the ideal situation would be government working in tandem with the big businesses to basically act as a referee to make sure that nothing negative or no manipulation or monopoly takes place. Am I right?
No, as I said, you don't grant a monopoly to a certain business. You don't grant a tax break for one industry versus another industry or one business versus another business. What you're there is to make sure literally that if a dispute arises between businesses, that there's somebody impartial in the middle that can help solve that dispute. And that's, as I said, there are going to be differences in terms of how people interpret law, but you have to start with this concept that it's not government's job to sit there and say, well, we're gonna promote economic development by picking and choosing these winning and losing industries, for example. We're going to invest the taxpayers' money so that we can get these industries up off the ground. We're going to put tariffs in place so we can support the industry that we have here because we don't want any competition from the foreigners to come in for this one here. And it's a difficult concept for people to get across. Yeah. But, free trade tends to benefit everybody.
Yes.
And I know that there's countries out there, and, China in particular, by the way, China could probably afford to subsidize their industries long enough to destroy many other industries. But at some point, if China then becomes the monopoly, new products, new services, new competitors will come up. They will rise up to compete against that. So nobody can have a perpetual permanent monopoly.
Yeah, it shows from history. Even the empires collapse at some point.
Right. Yeah.
And then new empires.
And beyond that, even if you look at the largest businesses in the United States today versus 100 years ago, they're all different businesses. 100 years ago, none of the businesses in the 1920s are the largest businesses in the United States today. Yeah. Even in the world, if you look at giant, Samsung, those businesses weren't even around 100 years ago. Yeah. So who knows what's going to be the big business 20, 30 years from now. But people look at that and they say, these businesses, they dominate. They're never going to be taken out. I would bet, and I'm going to date myself now, Beatrice. I should not do this. But I used to work for Polaroid. Do you know the camera company, Polaroid?
Yes.
Yes. And people thought Polaroid had the monopoly on instant film cameras. You take a picture, the Polaroid film came out. We had a monopoly. We were one of the 50th largest companies in the world. And within 20 years, Polaroid was gone.
Yeah. And so is Kodak and everyone else in that genre.
We switched to digital photography. We switched, as I said, there's other things, there's other competing technologies that will come along. So I don't even look at Facebook, Google, any of those types of businesses now as saying, oh my gosh, they're invincible. We can't compete with them, because probably 10, 15 years from now, there will be something else that comes up that completely usurps those businesses.
But if it's a totally socialist society, and then let's say that happens now, and it becomes a total socialist society where it's controlled by the oligarchies of big companies,
Yeah.
then no one is going to be able to change that tide, as you say, because there will be no competition.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as I said, and almost always you're going to see an oligopoly like that because it's sanctioned by the government.
So if companies want to actually remain in power for infinity, then socialism would be the best way to go.
The only way that they could get there is with regards to government power. That's the only way they could possibly stay there. Otherwise, and I'm going to use this as a good example. Facebook, people say, oh, Facebook is dominating. Well, if you're under the age of 20, you don't use Facebook. They use Instagram, they use TikTok, they use a different technology.
That's so true.
And so if you think of that there, what's the technology going to be 10 years from now? We don't know. Somebody else hasn't even invented that technology yet.
Wow. You're making us think. So what would be the future for, okay, so do you think governments are autonomous then? How do we get more governments to work in the way that you would say is an ideal situation, where because it's already changed. The way I look at it, it's not the way Milton Friedman envisioned it, No. It's not. A lot of countries, and I think I can't recall, how many countries are there in this world? Well, probably 80% of them don't operate the way Milton Friedman says they do. What would be the future of capitalism then, in your opinion?
That's a great question. I want to take that in a different direction, because it's the question you start with, and I think it's a different answer than where we're going to go with this one here. And it goes back to, if you look at government, people in power, and especially in government power, want to gain more power always. Okay. That's how they get into that business. If they wanted to be serving their fellow man, they'd get into business. They'd serve their fellow man through capitalism, right? So it's what's the check and balance against government power. Okay. And I think that's the biggest question you have there. If you look at, in 2 generations, Venezuela just, went from the richest country in Latin America to being a complete disaster because of that. I don't know what the inflection point is where people have to say, oh, this is all wrong, and they overthrow the government. I don't think in most nations, even the people in government power want to get to that level. They like the power, they want more power, but I don't think that they want to take it so much so that they're going to be the ones who become deposed. And so I think that's the only check and balance you have is the people in power not wanting to lose their power. It's a terrible way of thinking about that, if you will, but you almost are reliant upon those people that in their best self-interest say, we better let business survive. We better let our people essentially have some amount of flourishing so that we don't get thrown out of power. And as I said, it's a terrible way of looking at that one. If you, the countries though that do have a problem, and I was talking to a professor this week here in Texas, and he was telling me about the country of Georgia. Okay. And he went to go visit the country of Georgia probably 20 years ago. And he goes to the government office building. There's no heat. There's no electricity. And he goes and he meets with the Minister of Finance, and the guy says, we're going to be one of the top 5 countries for economic freedom. You just watch. And sure enough, that's what they did. They fired the police because the police were corrupt. They reduced the size of government. They got rid of all the tariffs. They did all of this stuff. And now Georgia, the country, is one of the top 5 economically free countries in the world. And it has led to an increase in the standard of living of the people in Georgia.
That's a exciting story.
And as I said, I don't know how it's a terrible thing to think that you have to get so bad that the government must be overthrown for somebody to then come in and say, here's how we have to do this. We've got to let the people be free. But I think that you're going to see that more and more often if you see a gradual progression towards even more socialism, because it's not going to work. And I don't know what the pain point is for the populace to actually overthrow the government. You see it in Venezuela, as I said, they don't have the weapons, they don't have the stuff, but they want to overthrow that government in some way, shape, or form. Within, I'm guessing, by the way, within 5 to 10 years, Venezuela's current government will be gone. It will be a free market paradise.
Wow. Okay, that we have to see. And for Georgia, how long did it take for Georgia to totally change itself?
It was about 20 years. So as I said, it was within a generation.
And I have a question here. Before I go on to my question, I have a question from the audience here. Susan Johnson is saying, is Rob familiar with the incredible bread machine film of 1975 in which Milton Friedman participated?
I am, but I would point you to a different component, and that different component I would point you to is Milton Friedman doing iPencil. And that's based off a story from a guy named Leonard Reed. And Leonard Reed essentially talked about how, and Milton Friedman does this in the Free to Choose film, by the way, which is why I like it more. Okay. How much does a pencil cost, Beatrice, in Malaysia?
60 cents. I haven't bought a pencil for a long time.
As I said, but
pencil analogy. I know this one, but you go ahead.
Not one person in the world knows how to make a pencil. If you think about it, you have the wood, and somebody had to go plant the tree, grow the tree. Somebody then came in and logged the tree, harvested the tree. They had to get the tree, they had to get the wood via a truck. Some truck driver had to go take that somewhere else to some kind of mill. The mill had to follow up so that they had the wood, and that's just the wood. Yep. Then you've got the eraser. Yep. You got the graphite in it. You got the little metal part that holds the eraser on. All of these things, not one person, the person growing the tree actually doesn't even know if it's going to be a pencil. Yep. The person who is taking it from the field to the mill does not know it's going to be a pencil. Nobody knows it's going to be a pencil until the pencil manufacturer orders all of these things from disparate places to put it together, and you can get the thing for less than $1.
Yeah.
There's not a single person that could actually make a pencil for under $1.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Voice of ASEAN thanks you for your time, and we thank Rob Chatfield from the Free to Choose Network for an extremely interesting and riveting conversation. And we will be uploading. I must apologize again for the technical difficulties that happened, but we will be uploading a recorded version of this dialogue in our portal for those who missed it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Rob.